Okay,
Get the-
we're recording now,
We
so,
are recording, and the city is also using a live transcript. So that'll be turned on as well, so it will transcribe.
all right, well, welcome everyone to the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for February 3rd, 2021. It's 5 o'clock. We have one petition on our agenda today. We have 5 members of our Zoning Board of Appeals with us. We have 6, one more is coming in. So
They're coming in.
just as a matter of reference, it takes 4 votes to approve a petition request. And again, we have 6 members of our board here today. Just as a matter of an overview, we always read the petition. We ask the petitioners to explain the reasons why in a little bit more detail. We allow the board members to ask questions. And then we often have follow-up questions from the board or advice from the city officials before we would have a vote. Again, we would ask the clerk to read the first petition, and then we will ask the petitioners to explain a little bit more detail.
Okay. The petition of Jacqueline Ferraro and Vicky Haskell, 306 Howard Avenue, Jamestown, New York, 14701, for a use variance to operate a dance studio in the former Grace Chapel located on parcel 370.16-6-57, located at 379 Buffalo Street, Jamestown, New York, in an R1 zone. Section 300-0305. The use of the building as a dance studio is not a permitted use within the R1 district. The first permitted district is the RC Multiple Family Residential and Professional Office District.
Thank you. And at this time, if you could please identify yourself if you're going to speak, name and home address each time you do speak, if there's a break in your time frame, just because that helps us as we record and as we document this for the future. So as the petitioners, Ms. Ferraro, would you like to speak? Would you like to identify yourself and your home address?
Yes. My name is Jacqueline Ferraro, and my home address is 432 South Avenue, Jamestown. If you want to introduce yourself.
And my name is Chris Haskell. I'm here for Vicky. It's 306 Howard Avenue, Jamestown, New York.
Yes, I am. I run a dance studio with my mother, Vicky Haskell, and she's currently teaching dance right now. So my dad is stepping in on her behalf. So it's very, very kind of him. And she's actually been running the dance studio for over 30 years. And once I returned home from college and living in a different area, I decided to come back and take over the studio with her. And we kind of revamped it a little bit, and we named it Dancing with Victoria, and we opened in 2016. And we are now looking to relocate to a more permanent place, which would be Buffalo Street.
Do you want to talk a little bit about why you chose that location? I mean, we got some of the background information, but it would be helpful for us to know why that location was chosen.
Of course. I'm actually a 3rd grade teacher in the Jamestown Public School District. So I teach a lot of children throughout the district. And that location is, first of all, I love that it's located in Jamestown, and it's located right next to Ring School. And again, we teach a lot of kids from Ring. So it would be so beneficial for them to be able to walk to dance class after school. And just being in the Jamestown School District, it's always a good thing to provide a safe and fun place for kids to go after school. And when I saw that location, I said, wow, that is just perfect for the kids in our community.
Okay. At this point, we open this up to members of the board. So please, if you have questions, either raise your hand or speak up. And you can ask Ms. Ferraro or Mr. Haskell questions about their proposal. Anyone? Go ahead, Mike.
Are you aware for how long that church has been on the market for?
I can help
I
answer
don't-
that
I'm sorry.
question. It was I said, I can help answer that question. It appears that it went on the market at the end of September of 20, and it went under contract 88 days after the initial listing period.
Thank you, Mr. Sword. Other questions?
I do have some questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Sword.
With regards to the application. I just want to maybe go over some of the questions that were asked in the application. And I guess first I'd like to start, and just thank you for being here, and just, I think this is a great adaptive use for this property, and it's very easy to embrace this type of use. And what you do matters. It brings joy to children. It brought joy to me when my daughter, probably 25 years ago, was in a dance class. Maybe it was your mother's class. So it brings joy to the kids. It brings joy, joy to the family. But sitting in this position as zoning board of appeals member, it gets a little bit tricky from the standpoint that I can't just make a judgment call that I like one use or I don't like another use. That's not my role by statute. And you filled out the variance request. There were four questions there. Those are the legal criteria that we have to look at and measure in order to meet the necessary, the criteria. How did you find that form? Did you find it easy to work with, easy to understand? It's a fairly new form that I think that that we've used with the Department of Development.
There were some questions that I found a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because I do too. And I kind of use as my sources of training, if you will. New York State has a division of local government services, and they have people that train. And I'm on the phone with them, sometimes with the same questions each month to get clarity. And I reach out to local attorneys, some of which have been in business a year, some of that have been on municipalities as their attorney for 30 years. And I reach out to Larry and people like Larry, code enforcement, zoning officers, just to get clarity. So it is a little bit confusing, and out of a courtesy to you and to explain what my rationale is, I'm just gonna go down through the questions real briefly and just tell you how I view the question and how I view a necessary answer to that question in order to check all the boxes. And all four of these questions have to be addressed and have to check the boxes that they meet the criteria. Unlike another type of a variance that would be a dimensional variance, an area variance, where you can look at the entire picture and there's a lot more room for interpretation. Here it isn't. Here it's pretty clear that all four questions have to be answered in the affirmative before this body, which is an appellate body, not a legislative body, needs to get answered before we can make a positive answer. Somebody gets a use variance. So just maybe go over the first question. And the question on number one is, does the current zoning as an R1 single family residential district deprive the owner of all economic use or benefits of the subject property? And there's 7 uses in that allowable in that district. And one of the uses is a church, and then it's followed by a single family use. And this church, the Grace Chapel, the deed shows that it's been there since 1951. And this is a permitted use by right. And I guess I would argue that this is a permissible use, and that there is a market for this type of property. Churches in our community, large and small, have a market. And some recent sales include churches on Hall Avenue, the Temple Hest building on Hall Avenue, a church on City View recently sold. There's been churches on West 3rd Street, and the Emmanuel Church on East 2nd Street, has recently sold. So there appears to be a market for a church. And what this says, this question needs to answer is the zoning so restrictive that there is no use that's permitted in the zoning code so that this property can be financially feasible for somebody to maintain and own? And again, I would argue that it is, that there is a demand for churches. And the second use here is a single family home. And there are churches in our community that have been remodeled to single family homes. And there's one now that's being developed on 10, I think it's Elmwood Avenue in the village of Faulkner, that's being renovated into a single family home. And another requirement of this is for the applicant to provide financial data. And I haven't seen any financial data, but just for the record, I guess I don't mean to be prickly about this, because this is a little bit, the form is a little bit confusing, but it's a good form. But have you provided any financial data that I haven't seen?
We provided the purchase agreement, I believe.
Okay.
I did email that.
Okay. And again, not to be prickly, I appreciate you being here, but on the form, it does say information that needs to be provided with the application. And that's the property survey and competent financial evidence that shows that the current zoning regulations deprive the owner of all economic uses or benefit of his or her land. So
Could I just interject a question, though? Is the sale contingent on getting the zoning request?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the second question on this, the unique circumstances, was left blank. And once again, all four questions have to be answered positively by this board in order to grant a use variance. But you didn't answer that question. Was it just an oversight, or was there a reason for that?
I guess maybe I didn't understand the question.
That's a fair answer, and a very honest answer too. So thank you for that. So I guess, is the property unique? And I would again argue that the property isn't unique. The site has characteristics that are similar to neighboring sites in regards to the site size, the shape, the topography, as well as the site improvements. And the corner lot enhances the site's appeal, although it is on Hayward, is a substandard road, in my opinion. It's narrow. It doesn't have any curbing or sidewalks, and it's being used by Ring School for access to their main entrance. And just quickly going through character of the neighborhood. I read your answer, and I couldn't agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more that, in my opinion, your proposed use does not change the character of the neighborhood, and I think your use would enhance the neighborhood. You would bring something that isn't there now, and people from the school, as you said, could walk there, and people from the neighborhood and community could use it. And the mixed uses of the school, other churches, the BPU building are all proximate to this property, including the commercial arterial of East 2nd Street. But and I guess another thing that comes into play on that particular requirement, I looked at where Jennifer sent the public hearing notices, the addresses, and many of them, if not all of them, were sent to addresses where the property owner didn't live in the property. And we have to send those notices within a certain number of feet of the subject property. So I think all of them were said to owners who, did not occupy their property, so they were investor owned. And that in of itself doesn't mean that these property owners have less interest in the dynamics of the neighborhood that they've made an investment in. Maybe not. I look across the street and you're willing to invest here, and I look across the street and there's a building that has a orange condemned sign on it. The one next door is boarded up. So the property owner here, Grace Chapel, compliments to them. They've really kept this building up nice. It's sided, nice windows, roof. I imagine it's a little bit of a challenge with those steep steps going into the front door, but I know there's access over onto Hayward Street. And then just in closing, number 4, how I see that needs to be answered is the alleged difficulty self-created? And again, property records indicate that the property was deeded to Grace Chapel in 1951. The zoning has been in place for many years. And in the 1990s, the comprehensive plan was updated. Therefore, the owner has used the property in compliance with both past and present zoning. And the zoning hasn't changed, prohibiting its use, making it unmarketable. For example, an example of that might be a property, let's say it's out on Fluvanna Avenue extension, out on Old Fluvanna Road, and you have a building that's been on the property for 50 years, and maybe it's a woodworking shop. And the development of the area changed, more residential homes were developed in the area, and the neighborhood zoning changed to residential. Well, that property owner may want to, if that property owner wanted to sell that property, it might be difficult to sell that property, not based on anything that he did. When he put the property in, it was in compliance with zoning, but the zoning changed around them, and it now precludes that property owner from marketing that property, but it wasn't self-created. It happened around him. So those are some of the things that I looked at in weighing this. And each time that I have a meeting like this, the New York State Division of Local Government Services has a a zoning board of appeals overview. It's a 2-hour webinar via video. And each meeting I look at that just to develop clarity on this, just to make sure that I've done my homework and I'm understanding the law. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. You're probably better off asking your questions if it's a legal questions to Mr. Haskin, who's here, or Mr. Scalise. But I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have something that I'd like to say. So as Mr. Sorg pointed out, this is a legal process, okay? And he pointed out some of his concerns. The way I look at it, he's probably correct as everything stands. One of your main impediments are going to be, in my view, is to describe the hardship. And I would suggest, because what we need to determine is whether that property, that church there could be a reasonable return as it's currently zoned. What I suggest is perhaps if you know the realtor who listed it, if they could come and speak with us about that aspect of it, I think that would be helpful. So I don't know if we could do this or not, but a motion that I would make when it's appropriate is to adjourn this for a month and to allow you to, 1, perhaps consult an attorney, and 2, to gather appropriate evidence that's needed. Because, when I look at this, I think you're, to no fault of your own, but your expectations of this meeting are a little bit different than, what actually is supposed to transpire. And I would hate that you don't have a fair opportunity to have your case fully heard because, you lack the you were unaware that this was going to be such a formal legal process.
Mr. Panabianco, did you make a motion to table this petition?
Yeah. And what I would,
If that's the case, I need a second, and we'd have to vote on it immediately and stop discussion. So is there a second to that motion?
I guess I would ask, is this something that, Mr. Haskell and Ms. Farrow, is this something that you'd like to do? Would you like to take that next step? I think Mr. Panabianco is a great idea. I'd like to, I guess I would like to give you every opportunity to be heard and address these things, because again, the legal issues that have to be met are, they're strict.
If we get a second, we can just table it, vote to table it, and then tell Jacqueline and Chris to work with Mr. Scalise a little bit more to get the answers to that form, or to get an attorney to help them and to work with the Realtor, as Mr. Panabianco says. But I need a second.
I would second that.
Thank you, Mr. Sword. And Jennifer, if we could call the roll, please, on a tabling motion on the petition of Jacqueline Ferraro and Vicky Haskell for a use variance on the property at the former Grace Chapel.
Just one question before we vote, Ellen. Is there a reason that we have to table for exactly a month? I mean, if there are temporal conditions that would indicate that folks could get the application particulars in order, could we reconvene earlier than a month?
We could have the clerk call a special meeting as long as there was enough time to advertise it, because it has to be re-advertised again. So thank you, Tim.
Sorry, I'm just worried about the purchase agreement following through. I mean, I would hate to lose this building, you know, and have the opportunity to bring so much more to the community, the Jamestown community. I mean, I want to be in Jamestown at that particular place, because like I said, it could enhance the neighborhood. So if we could do it, and I guess sooner than a month, that would be wonderful, because I just don't want this opportunity to fall through and then have all these kids be unable to take dance lessons.
Just a suggestion that you work with the Realtor and ask them to extend the offer so that it could be up to a month, only because, again, we want to make sure that you have everything you need in order, and that we have the opportunity to re-advertise if we're going to have a meeting prior to our usual monthly meeting, which is on the first Wednesday of the month. So it would be my suggestion. Mr. Haskell and Mr. Scalise can, say more about that, but if you could get the Realtor to agree, and obviously the seller to agree to extend the offer for a little longer, that would allow you to get things in order. Now,
I am going to be completely honest with you, that they were even a little bit hesitant having this meeting as late as this was, because we put the offer in, a while ago. A while ago. So I really just, I understand, what everyone is saying, but I just don't want it to fall through and just have our students, not really have a place to go.
well, we have a motion on the floor. We can vote one way or the other. We can vote to table and we can deal with having to reschedule, or we can vote to not table by opposing the tabling motion and move forward. So at this time, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll on a tabling motion that has been made and seconded.
Ms. Kamei?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Kenyon?
No.
Mr. Panabianco?
yes,
Mr. Sneal?
No,
Mr. Sorg?
Yes.
And Chairwoman DeTanto?
Yes. So we're going to vote to table this, not because we don't want to bring it up, but because we need to get things in order on your part so that we can get through the questions that have come up so far. What that means is that we need to have you work with Mr. Scalise, go through that form again, provide more detail to us. And that should make the process go quicker. If we can get that done soon, then we would be able to schedule a special meeting and we would have the membership again on board to have a meeting earlier than a month. That's what I heard people say, that we would be willing to have a meeting earlier than a month from now.
The problem is that is not what the motion stipulated.
We're just
I don't know.
tabling it. We can call a special meeting, Tim. It doesn't say that it has to be a month.
I understand that, but Mr. Penabianco, he stipulated in his motion that we would table it for a month. That's what you just voted on.
Mike, would you be willing?
Of course, yeah, I'll amend, yeah, yes, well, let's table it, just table it.
Second,
Okay, so we are going to amend the original motion that we're just tabling it. We're not putting a time frame. It can be earlier than a month that we would come back together to look at this petition again. Jennifer, can you call the roll on the amendment?
Of course. Ms. Kame,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Kenyon,
I'm still a no on the
okay.
motion, period.
Mr. Panabianco,
Yes,
Mr. Smeal,
yes,
Mr. Sorg,
Yes,
and Chairwoman DeTanto.
Yes. Okay, so the amended motion now should be voted on again. We voted on the amendment. Now we have to vote on the amended motion, which is, again, to table this, period. We will get the information that's needed from the petitioner, and then we will decide if we can have a meeting at a date sooner than the next month. Can you call the roll on the amended motion?
Yes. Ms. Kame,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Kenyon,
Yes,
Mr. Panabianco,
yes,
Mr. Smeal,
yes,
Mr. Sorg,
yes,
and Chairwoman DeTanto.
Yes. So just to be clear, again, we're going to ask that Mr. Scalise, Mr. Haskin work with the petitioners to get the information that's needed so that we can reconsider this petition as early as possible, and it could be before our next monthly meeting.
Okay,
Okay?
so we will speak with Mr. Scalise tomorrow possibly to figure out, because we are a little confused on what you want, and I know.
This is, so if you wouldn't mind, you have to prove that that church can't receive a reasonable return, how it's zoned. So you need someone to come, basically, for me to vote yes, and I want to, I need to know that as it is, the person who owns that can't receive a reasonable return on their investment. So what I would advise is speak with a lawyer, and oftentimes a realtor can be helpful because they can discuss the value of the property, why this is necessary, why it can't, so.
And it could be that the owner of the Grace Chapel could help as well. Now,
Correct.
Mr. Soar gave us information that it's been on the market for 88 days. I do not know how long it's been since that's been used as a church or a chapel. That would be helpful information as well. And that's probably some information that, again, Mr. Scalise can help you uncover, the realtor can help you uncover, and maybe a representative from the Grace Chapel could also help.
Thank you.
Okay? All right. We don't have any other petitions on the agenda, so at this point, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for now. And we'll wait for Mr. Scalise and Mr. Haskin to get us more information so that we can decide when we can have another meeting. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Good night.